that should not have been possible at 60 FPS on a Switch game. And this is why it's the best looking Switch game out there.
So what you just heard and saw is a little clip from this video that is a smaller piece of a podcast from the YouTube channel Kiwi Talks, who interviewed Jack Matthews, the lead technical engineer for the original Metroid Prime back on Nintendo GameCube. And here he's talking about how Metroid Prime Remastered, that game that came out on Switch back this February, is the most impressive game on Switch because it's running at 60 frames per second, while also using physical-based rendering, which you don't really see on Switch with everything else that's going on in the game. It's just incredible what they accomplished with that remaster. But then, what does this imply for Metroid Prime 4? Especially when we factor in the recent rumors. Well, that's what we're talking about today. Welcome everyone, this is Andres Restart, and this time we are talking about how I think Metroid Prime 4 is going to be the best looking or most technically impressive Switch game, and perhaps by a sizable margin here. I'm very excited thinking about what this could be. Now today's discussion is going to be more of a simple discussion. I'm just going to be talking about what this is and why I think it makes sense for what I'm suggesting, and you're just going to see some Prime Remastered gameplay in the background. But before going forward, let me point out that we are aiming to hit 50,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. With your help, it just might be possible. So with the initial introduction of this video, I showed a little clip from this interview with Kiwi Talks, and again, that will be linked in the description below, from Jack Matthews, who worked on the initial Metroid Prime, and he explains why Prime Remastered looks so impressive because of that physical-based rendering that they're doing that you don't really see on Switch games. And what I think is important about this is that from what we understand, Retro Studios is still using this engine, what I believe is called the Root engine, but it's simply been adapted and updated over the years. It's the same engine back from the original Metroid Prime, but it's been really worked on and improved for modern standards to work on the Switch, and perhaps beyond. And really, I think Prime Remastered should speak for itself. The way this game looks and runs is incredible. If Metroid Prime 4 is going to be based off something using this same technology but a more advanced, newer version of it, that alone I think should speak volumes to what this game is going to be. But I think it goes a bit beyond that. When we also account for this recent rumor that's come from the Xbox Era podcast that we've been talking about, how Metroid Prime 4 looks visually unbelievable, yet at the same time it looks big and open, drawing comparisons to Halo Infinite, an open world game. Now, I will stress for like the 14th time, they're not necessarily saying that it's open world, simply very vast. And when I envision Metroid Prime 4 having big and open areas, something that's far more vast and significant than anything we've seen in the prior Prime games, and yet it's also going to be using an even more updated, better version of this engine that they used to make Prime Remastered, I'm left thinking that this game has to be something that's just going to straight up blow our minds, because Prime Remastered itself is arguably something that many of us didn't see coming. And it's also why I'm really harping on this interview with Jack Matthews, a developer, the initial lead technical engineer on the original Metroid Prime. He didn't expect the Prime Remaster to look like this. So what will Retro Studios and Nintendo accomplish with Metroid Prime 4? Based off this rumor from Nick Baker of Xbox Era, we're in for something incredible. And with these thoughts in mind, that initial rumor we heard from Imran Khan a way back, how Retro Studios pitched this idea of a remaster of Metroid Prime, they showed something of it as a proof of concept, and then Nintendo saw that, greenlit the remaster project, but then also shortly afterwards canned the Metroid Prime 4 project, supposedly with Bandai Namco, and transitioned over to Retro Studios, where they announced the restart. What Nintendo saw with what Retro Studios has been working on impressed them enough to go in this direction, and they were willing to abandon a project that may have cost them quite a bit of money. And also, they've delayed the game for a very long time. The game was announced at E3 2017. Here we are more than 6 years after that moment, but it feels like we're getting close to an actual unveiling for this game. I don't want to say for sure we'll see it in the supposed September Nintendo Direct, but there's a lot of talk from a number of people that this game is coming out sometime next year. So if that's true, you gotta think we're close. And once we see this game, then we'll have an idea of just how impressive this game is. But with this in mind, of it being big and vast and using physical-based rendering and an even better version of the engine that was running Prime Remastered, but also keeping in mind the limitations of the Switch itself and how dated of a hardware it is, I do have concerns. I do wonder, is the Switch version going to still stay at 60 frames per second? Is it still going to have a solid resolution? It feels like something's got to give. Especially if they're also developing Prime 4 with Switch 2 in mind. Because with how long it's taken for Metroid Prime 4, at this point they have to also be making this game thinking that maybe also there's going to be a version for Switch 2. And there's a lot of speculation that Prime 4 is going to be a cross-gen title. Some have speculated that it's going to be a Switch 2 exclusive. I don't think that's going to be the case. We have a number of reasons to think otherwise. One example being that still on Nintendo's financial reports that it's still for Switch, and that it was initially announced for Switch. Never mind the fact that the amount of people who own a Switch, there's just so many out there that it might be kind of foolish for Nintendo to not give Metroid Prime, this series that hasn't had the best sales, the best opportunity to succeed with that large install base. So considering the money that there is left to be made, and also just assuming Nintendo's going to stay professional and make good on their initial promise to their consumers, that alone I think bodes well, but accounting for also the financial reports as I mentioned, and also rumors like from Andy Robinson saying it's going to be the last big Switch game, I think it is going to come to Switch, but I also think that there's a good chance it's going to be cross-gen. Maybe it will be the last big Switch game. Maybe they will treat Metroid Prime 4 similar to Breath of the Wild for the Wii U. Breath of the Wild was in development throughout the entire Wii U era, and it didn't come out until the very end. It was a last big Wii U game. Prime 4 could be the last big Switch game. Now, I'm not thinking that Prime 4 is going to be a Switch 2 launch title, because I think that's going to be left for 3D Mario, but maybe a month or two after the release of 3D Mario on the Switch 2, if it is happening sometime next year, maybe then we see Prime 4 as a cross-gen title. And I talk about all this because I can see a scenario where Nintendo does get a decent running version of Prime 4 on Switch. But the premier version, the version that will stick to 60 frames per second and will have a consistent high resolution with great, solid, consistent performance across the board, that's going to be the ultimate showcase for what this game is, will probably be on Switch 2. And because there may be a better version available that they can showcase, they may be more willing to make some compromises on the Switch version to get it running relatively well. Now, historically speaking, Retro Studios always make sure to have 60 frame per second games, especially the Metroid Prime games. So I would think that no matter what happens, no matter what compromises they make, the Switch version of Metroid Prime 4 will still be at 60 frames per second. I would assume that. But when we consider other first-person games that have come from more powerful systems and are ported over to the Switch, usually one of the things that is compromised on is frame rate. They go down to 30, they make it a consistent fluid 30, but still 30. And also having a dynamic resolution where things can look a little spotty and blurry. I think Prime 4 will likely look better than any other first-person port we've seen on Switch. And I have to imagine that what they're going to accomplish with Prime 4 will overall appear more impressive than what we've seen with Prime Remastered, still putting in the conversation as the most technically impressive or best looking Switch game. But the better version obviously is going to be on Switch 2, assuming there is a Switch 2 version. Before I end the video though, I have a few other considerations I would like to point out. So for Metroid Prime Remastered, something that was a bit of a downgrade compared to the original version of Metroid Prime was the way lighting worked when you were shooting down hallways or environments. They had a texture that would show whenever you would shoot, so you would see things light up a bit whenever you would shoot, and in Prime Remastered, it's only very, very subtle. And the reason for this is because the way the GameCube operated and the way the Switch operates are two very different things, and the solutions that need to be made to make things work on the GameCube versus what needs to be done for the Switch, again, are very different. So by remastering the original Metroid Prime and not building the game ground up for Switch, there are limitations. Though with Metroid Prime 4, something that will be built ground up for Switch, and it not being a remaster but a brand new game, these little compromises they're more likely to find solutions that more likely will represent different things in the environment better, including lighting when we're shooting our arm cannon. I imagine what we see overall in Prime 4 will be more interactive and dynamic. It's going to feel more like a living, breathing, exotic alien world. But something else that I think would be fair to address is being graphically impressive versus technically impressive. Because I think when you say technically impressive, it accounts for a few other factors, like physics, for example. So you could say that Pikmin 4, Luigi's Mansion 3, or Prime Remastered are maybe in the top 3 or 5 best looking Switch games. And Tears of the Kingdom maybe is in that conversation depending on who you ask. But from just a graphics perspective, maybe it's not as impressive. Of course, if you account for the large world and the seamless transitions from the sky to the depths below, and then all of the vehicles you can make, or just overall crafts and the physics at hand, and then all the NPCs and enemies and characters you can interact with on screen all at the same time with everything else that's going on. Tears of the Kingdom is very impressive with everything that it accomplishes within not just the graphics but the overall gameplay. I think you can make a pretty good argument that Tears of the Kingdom is the most technically impressive Switch game to date. So will Metroid Prime 4 go beyond that? Graphically speaking, I think most people across the board are going to say that Metroid Prime 4 will be the better looking game. But technically speaking, that's a tougher call, because we do not know what they're going to change with the gameplay in Metroid Prime 4. We're not sure what kind of evolutions they will be making to the series. What the Zelda team has accomplished with the physics and everything else in Tears of the Kingdom is insane. But I also have a feeling Prime 4 is going to be doing some really special things too. I am very excited just thinking about how amazing this game is going to be. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andre's Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.